Welcome to Upfront. I'm Daphne Good, and this program concentrates on leadership on South Vancouver Island. We have a very impactful leader in Nick Versteeg today. The focus of Nick's two companies, DV Media and DV Cuisine, is to produce short features and documentaries related to different topics, history, and issues from around the world. He's done a lot of traveling, always with his camera. He has a number of awards for various films, and they've all been shown in a tremendous number of networks, A&E, the Discovery Channel, History Channel, CBC and CTV, as well as Shaw TV. So thank you for that, Nick, for sharing your great work. And we want to talk about the documentary. Briefly, we're going to give a bit of a preview to this fantastic documentary we're going to show today, which really gives great insight. It's called Nepal's Heartbeat. It's going to show us what happened with the donations from many people here on Vancouver Island that were made after the earthquake that killed more than 8,000 people. It was, of course, devastating, and many of us read about it in the news for days and weeks. Nick, you and I both saw the devastation in Nepal firsthand. We were both traveling there in 2015. Unfortunately for you, you were absolutely trapped in the earthquake. I saw it just 3 months later on. Take us back to that day, which was horrifying for you and so many people, of how you were trapped in the earthquake itself.
It's Ivan, a good friend where I was traveling with, had just come back from Everest Base Camp. It was a spectacular trip. We loved it. We were on a huge high, and we were waiting for the dentist, Jeff Phillips, and his partner that we were filming there, to come back. So we had a day in Namche Bazaar, and we're walking to the village, and we finally ordered, we're back in the lodge, and we wanted to order lunch. And we had just ordered lunch when the entire building started to shake. And I tell you, Daphne, it's the first time in my life probably where I was really scared. I was incredible fast. I sprinted out of the building. We didn't huddle under the first door, but under the second door. And then, and with the four of us, more or less, we were kind of huddled together there. And then you saw stones coming down, kids running through the streets because it's in the middle of the day. A whole building in front of us was going, sideways. And you think like, whoa, we knew it was an earthquake, and then about 40 seconds later, it stopped. And we took a bunch of kids with us because we wanted to find a safer place. The most amazing thing, and Ivan was talking about it, he was the last one out, that when this all happened and when we were running out, the wall of the lodge where we stayed went inwards instead of outwards. Now that was very luckily. Most of the buildings that had damage there all happened on the top between the eavesdrops. But you also have to understand, and you will see it in the documentary, that it's not just small little bricks. We're talking about, because they use the stones and the bricks that they have, it's huge boulders. And an amazing story is that Peter, an Australian fellow who wanted to actually go and have a nap because we all came back with the Khumba cough, from base camp. He wanted to go and have a nap, and we actually talked him into to literally to come and have lunch with us. We said, And so his room was right where the wall is, and if you saw his room, the big blocks more or less came straight through his room. So
devastating. Yeah. And one of the miraculous parts about all of that is that your equipment survived.
That after about an hour, I realized, I son of a gun said, oh my goodness, 5 weeks of footage, and you know what it is, right? It's still in the lodge. And because my room was in the second, and we're talking about rooms, like you have to talk about plywood, it's very basic. And it was scary. After a couple of hours, we went back to the lodge. And of course, we had aftershocks and the whole works. And then I found my bag just sitting there, a lot of dust on it, but nothing had hit it, unfortunately. So and that stayed with me the entire next couple of days.
You were so extremely lucky, Nick, at that time, and that was 2015. The documentary today, though, that we're going to show is a happier tone because you're talking about the rebuilding that has happened over about a 2-year period. So Before we see the documentary, how was it for you when you returned to Nepal, your emotions?
Wonderful. I think we had promised them that we would come back after 2 years. Had the same guide, Bibi, again with us, and it was wonderful because we really wanted to find out what happened with the money. Like, we always donate to all these causes, and we seldomly see actually what happens with the money. And you're going to see in the documentary too, in the Khumba Valley, in Kumchung and Kunde, where we really we helped. The funding all went through that region and direct to that region and direct to the people. That's where we saw, and that was a real joy. That's where we really saw what happened. Is when people work together and help to rebuild.
And part of the reason for that is that you and myself as well, I did a mini-series. Your documentary pointed out that giving to the Edmund Hillary Foundation was probably one of the most positive moves anybody could make in any part of the world. They're extremely responsible. They're very much in touch with the people of Nepal on a constant basis.
It was great because Chris Considine, the Consul General, advised us to talk to the Edmund Hillary Foundation. And I think that was a very good move, because when we left there, they said, please don't go to the government, because at that time they still had, a kind of a corrupt government. I think it has gone better, but it was great to work with the Edmund Hillary Foundation, to directly work with them, because we knew that the money then would go there directly.
A little while ago, I was approached by a young woman who said, I really want to go to Nepal. She had watched the miniseries that we had on Shaw TV, and she was excited. So I was happy to give her some time and tell her a little about the country and the people. And it turned into a movement. It's a very small and a very grassroots movement that kind of evolved through her family. And I know that you also teamed up with this organization out of Victoria called Another Brick in Nepal. Very cute name. It shows the work that organization does, particularly to rebuild schools. And I was really impressed by them. You teamed up with them, and how did you come in touch with them in Nepal?
It was actually very funny. My wife was watching a program on television, and I saw his commercial. I heard his commercial. Actually, I had my back to the TV, Rob Tourneur, his organization. And so I called him the next day. And I said, Rob, by the way, I said, tell me a little bit more about the work you're doing. He says, well, I was there, we're going to rebuild schools. So we teamed up, and he says, I'm coming with you. So he joined us for a week. It's in the documentary. And I'm very happy to tell, this is kind of a follow-up, is that the school is being built. There are pictures on our website, actually, that people can follow, though. And he's actually planning to build way more schools.
The good thing is that we can tell you there are frequent updates on Nick Versteeg's website. You can find updates about Nepal. You can find other updates about the many other films that he is producing on a regular basis, everything from the Cowichan watershed to Nepal. And that website is dvmedia.ca. So this is exciting. Now we're all going to be updated on the most recent film that Nick Versteeg has produced. Thank you so much for sharing it with us, Nick. We'll be back after the film to tell people a bit more on the updates of how Vancouver Islanders have made a tremendous difference. Now let's watch Nick Versteeg's Nepal's Heartbeat.
Documentary film producer Nick Versteeg and his guide Bibi Magar are back at the same lodge where they were staying when the earthquake struck in Namche Bazaar, Nepal, on the 25th of April, 2015. This documentary is the result of a promise Nick had made his Nepalese friends, that he would come back within 2 years to document the progress of the rebuilding.
Beside the rebuilding effort in Nepal, I also wanted to find out what happened in those first couple of days after the earthquake. Who was in charge? Where does the help come from?
Nearly 9,000 people died that day. 22,000 were injured, and close to 600,000 structures destroyed. The Nepalese army was on the front lines.
In the disaster, we have a National Emergency Operation Center that was under the Home Ministry, that was immediately formed to manage the rescue. And the same day, our Nepal Army, Nepal Police, and the armed police and other stakeholders, they have been involved for the rescue missions. And we also request the help from the international communities. We also received the help. The first help we received from the India. The Indian Army teams, they arrived in the same day night. And subsequently we received many teams from all over the world.
One of the teams was the dog rescue team from the Burnaby firefighters.
I received a call on the 25th when the earthquake happened from the coordinator with the Canadian Medical Assistance Team, and he said, we're thinking we'll probably be going to be going because of the size of the magnitude of the earthquake and so on, and the depth that occurred, and would you be interested in going? And then I said, yes, of course we would.
So it was just a very quick adjustment to the family to say, I'm leaving tonight and I'm not sure when I'm coming back, just going to help out whichever way we could in Nepal from the earthquake.
I first received the phone call asking if I wanted to go. I said I was in right away and that I would pay for my own way, as did everyone else. Jeff kept working Cathay Pacific, and they agreed to fly us over there. They let the dogs ride up in the seats with us. They sat on the floor right behind the first class. That was apparently unprecedented, never been done before. We were fortunate enough to meet a lady who was in first class. She saw the dogs. She's active with the SPCA. She was asking why, what we were doing and why we had the dogs on the plane. Turns out her husband owns Milwaukee Tools, and there was $10,000 worth of tools there that met us at Hong Kong Airport.
Well, it was our understanding at the time that it was the Nepalese military, that they were controlling everybody in and out of the base, but the United Nations had certainly set up headquarters and seemed to be directing all the operations out of their office.
Because in the time of disaster, it's very difficult to manage. The management is the biggest and difficult task. How we can mobilize our expertise, our teams in the field, and what are the equipments we really need in the time of disaster.
I told them that we have the ability to, as a technical search group, to locate victims, live or dead. And so we started off the next morning with our equipment, and they give you an area of the map of the city, and it's up to you to go and search that sector for every collapsed building that you see.
The scent really comes and goes, eh?
What's that?
The scent really comes and goes.
There are different types of electronic equipment that can locate even heartbeat, but it's not the same. The dog, it's in his nature and his breed.
The thing that really struck me was the people, the Nepalese people. For people that had lost everything, still seemed to be in good spirits. They were extremely respectful. When we were assigned our 11 square kilometer region in Kathmandu for our first search area, we would show up to our sites and decide how we were going to do our technical search. And the people all came around and they showed us an amazing amount of respect because they knew that we were searching for their loved ones. So that really struck me, how much respect they gave us. So that was a real poignant point for me, seeing how the character of these people.
In the next phase, after this search and rescue phase over, the army helped the government for the reconstruction as well.
After sleeping in tents for 2 days after the earthquake, Nick and his team flew back to Lukla, the path to Lukla having been too heavily damaged by the landslides to permit foot travel.
When we left Nepal 2 years ago, I promised that I would come back. We did a big fundraiser on Vancouver Island. We raised a lot of money, and I really wanted to come back not only to see the people again, but also to see what happened with the money that was donated. We worked with the Edmund Hillary Foundation, and together there was about $200,000 raised, including our portion. And what I really thought we would do is follow actually the money, show for a change what happens with the money that people donate. So seldomly we see what happens with the money, so it was for us very important to actually show it.
After landing in Lukla, one of the most dangerous airports in the world, it is then a 2-day trek to Namche Bazaar. The trek from Lukla to Namche can be done in one full day. But unless you are experienced at trekking at high altitude and extremely fit, taking 2 days over the journey is strongly recommended. A spectacular trek through the mountains. Nick's guide Bibi is showing where the landslide was that cut off the road from Namche to Lukla in 2015. Because it's so tough to get supplies here, a lot of the houses are rebuilt with metal cladding. On the way, Nick and Bibi watch these two men try and split a large boulder. 10 days later, on the way back, perseverance had triumphed and the boulder is in 4 pieces. The rocks will be used to rebuild homes. Here in Canada, heavy machinery and blasting would have accomplished the same in a matter of hours, but not in Nepal. Nepal is timeless, and the spirit of the people is a combination of perseverance, hope, and relentless optimism.
Being back in Namche was very emotional. We saw the owner and her daughter were there. The lodge across from the lodge where we were was completely rebuilt. The building that we saw disintegrate. I was there with Bibi, my guide, who was there also with us. And you almost, I relived the nightmare scenario that we had there. You know, we knew how lucky we are to get out of the building on time.
Nick and Bibi are finally having the lunch that they ordered 2 years ago. Namche is rebuilding. Some locals say this is happening only with help from the outside. They speak of a lack of organisation, coordination, and adequate help from the government. It was the community itself which got together to finance the projects. The funds raised were distributed by the Edmund Hillary Foundation directly to the people in the Khumba Valley.
And one of the challenges we face in the rebuilding process in Khumba because Khumba is located in a very remote Himalayan region, we don't have access to roadways. So the only way to bring in materials, construction, especially construction materials from Kathmandu is we have to take it by a truck to the nearest roadway section, and then from there we have to take the materials by a helicopter to the nearest airport, and from the airport we have to again hire porters to carry it to our construction site. So our construction site are either located as 1 day or 2 days walk from the airport.
It's amazing to see what the people are able to carry to the mountain villages from the airport. These are hardy people. The narrow trekking paths defy the use of motorized vehicles, and helicopters are in very short supply, if they're available at all. They also passed hundreds of donkeys with bags of cement used in the foundations for the houses.
The people of Khumbu didn't wait for government support to rebuild their homes because in Khumbu the weather is very cold. It's impossible to live in tents, especially in winters. So when the earthquake happened in April, they started to rebuild on their own. The Sir Edmund Hillary Foundation also raised funds in Canada to support the affected communities in Solkhumbu. And in 2015, we had approved several projects from the area.
The Khumba Valley, where we spent about 10 days, is practically rebuilt. There's still a lot of work to be done. It was fantastic to see how the school has been rebuilt, that they're working on the hospital. So really the money was very well spent there.
Many houses destroyed by the earthquake, and among them my house had also completely destroyed, and we stayed outside in the tent for several months. When I informed Karen from the Hillary Foundation about the condition of my house, and she provided me financial support, and then I rebuilt my new house. I am very grateful to Drunken Rotary Club, and with the financial support of Rotary Club, I was able to rebuild my house.
For a little extra income, he has also started a small shop. And Nick had made another promise.
I had promised the kids in Kumchung, I said, when I come back, I will take care of you with soccer, we call it football, of course, with football gear. And the Vancouver Whitecaps from Vancouver had given me balls and shirts and toques. And it was a fantastic experience to share that with the kids, not only in Kumchung, but also in Kunde and in Tamay.
Thank you for Whitecaps.
Next, Bibi and Nick trekked to Kunde. This is a favourite acclimatisation trip, which leads to the Everest View outlook point and continues to Sherpa villages of Kumjung and Kunde. At the monastery, the people are working on ornaments that were damaged. Kunde was hit very hard during the earthquake, especially the hospital.
The hospital was built in 1966 by Sir Edmund Hillary, and now is funded by the Sir Edmund Hillary Foundation in Canada, which is based in Toronto. Then the Sir Edmund Hillary Foundation in Canada, organized a fundraising program there, and they raised a lot of money. Not only, and they raised a lot of money for the schools and as well as the hospitals.
The hospital is getting some extra rooms, and again, we see the incredible difficulties in getting materials. Women are pounding rocks in the smaller stones to be used in the building process. They even have a few small greenhouses for fresh vegetables. Maybe an idea for North American hospitals. The first views of Everest, Lhotse, and Ama Dablam will definitely take your breath away. The next day, Nick and Bibi travel to Tamay, another village that was damaged during the earthquake in the Khumba Valley.
I had not been to Tamay the last time. Again, like 2 years ago, we left Kumchung in the snow. The weather changes here incredibly quickly. It's a 7-hour trek through the mountains with steep cliffs and incredible views.
Dr. Kame showed his repaired home. This is his village. He makes the trip to the Kunde hospital 3 times a week. Yes, by foot. It takes him only 5 hours. At an altitude of 3,739 meters, in a magnificent amphitheatre of Himalayan peaks, is Tamay, the home village of Tenzin Norgay, the first Sherpa to climb Everest over 50 years ago. The village of Tame makes great use of the water from the mountains. It provides the water for the village and a small hydro project that creates power for a large part of the Khumba Valley. The village has a small community health clinic. The Tame Monastery, perched on the steep cliff overlooking the village, is about 500 years old. Tame is part of the vast spiritual wealth of Tibetan Buddhism and of Nepal.
The Khumba Valley, where we spent about 10 days, is practically rebuilt. There's still a lot of work to be done. It was fantastic to see how the school has been rebuilt, that they're working on the hospital. So really the money was very well spent there because it is also such an incredible remote location to get to. When you go from Namche and you climb up all the way to where you come first at the airport that is only used to bring materials with helicopters, you see incredible amount of material that is then taken for hours and hours to the smaller villages. So you see all the work that has been done here and still is being done is very encouraging.
One of the Kathmandu jewels was the Dharahara Tower. 200 people died here when it collapsed, and the plans to rebuild it is the only thing visible so far in terms of reconstruction. The rebuilding will take years, and throughout the city we see that most of the buildings are being held up by wooden poles. The area of Bhaktapur is very busy rebuilding.
It was fantastic to have pictures from Bhaktapur before the earthquake and after the earthquake. And it was incredible to go back there now. Most sites, of course, that they were rebuilding were closed for the public, but they let us on the sites. And to see what's happening there is absolutely amazing. They have to rebuild these temples, and they do it with the materials that are original, the original materials. So you see a lady walking in a kind of a brown mud that is being used to put the stones back together because they want to put them back together in the same state as they were when they found them. Of course, that always has a big worry, what happens if there is another earthquake.
In Bhaktapur, 106 heritage structures were destroyed, while 126 were partially damaged. Within the municipality area, 66 heritage monuments were destroyed and 50 were partially damaged. All the items from the collapsed temples are numbered and catalogued, painstakingly chiseled to make them fit like a giant three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. The work will take at least 3 years to complete. The Nepalese people like to contribute. So to whitewash the Bodhana stupa, people donated some money that is used to buy the powder. Then volunteers are taking up the buckets to whitewash the dome. Nick also wanted to find out what is happening outside of Kathmandu, where the situation, according to many news reports, is very different. He joined Rob Torner from Victoria, BC, who has started an organisation, Another Brick in Nepal, with the goal to rebuild schools in Nepal.
On April 27th, 2015, I opened up the Globe and Mail at my local coffee shop, and in the center of the A section there was a bifold full-color picture of Kathmandu and the devastation of the earthquake. I knew that the earthquake had happened. I'd heard about it on the news, but this picture just jumped out at me. It was very powerful. It was color. I'm a bricklayer, and of course the devastation in Kathmandu was it was just overwhelming. And so I took that picture back to my office and put it on a bulletin board just to look at and ponder it for a little bit, because something reached out to me in that photo. We decided and planned a trip for October, and at that time we did the trek to Everest Base Camp, which was quite an experience. And then from there I'd connected with some friends who had connected us with some Nepali friends, and we went to the region of Sindapolchok to observe the earthquake damage there. We connected with the people in the village of Apchauer, and I knew on that trip and that day that we spent here in Apchauer that we had, I think, found our project. So once again I returned to Canada, and through the next couple of 3 months we put together our board. We enlisted the help of a Nepali who works with our nonprofit organization now.
To get to the village of Apchauer is not easy. The traveller must overcome a variety of obstacles.
The biggest challenge that we face is the communication and the remoteness of where we are. You know, to get to the village is a very tough drive. It was on and off roads and several river crossings, the same river, going back and forth just to get there, and it was a challenge.
Here is where we see for the first time the challenges of the villages outside of Kathmandu. Apchauer village looks like the earthquake happened yesterday. We see half-finished buildings and know that the government promised the people 3 payments, but only 1 has arrived so far. Most people live in corrugated metal shacks.
When we got to the community, we were very surprised and very thankful that the community had gone together and actually expanded the trail to a road up to the school so that we could actually get the vehicle almost to the school.
Hello, again. The students were very lucky 2 years ago that the earthquake happened on a Saturday when there was no school.
So this is a temporary building that was put up after the earthquake in 2015. The rubble that they've salvaged is over to my left. And this is the second building here that is condemned, of course. So the plan is to build two 2 new structures. One the government of Nepal is building with 3 classrooms in it, and then another brick in Nepal. We'll be building one with 4 classrooms and an office. Right over there. I'm back here in Nepal now. It's my 4th trip since October 2015, and we've been come back out to the Nuwakot region to Apchawar, where we met with the local community in the village, and the children were there as well. The children are not attending school right now; they're between semesters, and it's a primary school, grades say kindergarten through to 5. To convey to them, with the grateful support of a number of donors in British Columbia, that we're going to be able to rebuild their school. We will be building your school. We'll be rebuilding your school this year in 2016. So yesterday we talked to them and gave them 20,000 rupees, which is about $275 Canadian, but that's enough to cover the labor to take down the building that still remains standing and prepare for reconstruction of a new building.
If it was up to the kids, they would like to start today.
The idea in Canada or in our Western society of the rebuilding a school connotates huge dollars and huge expenses, but here in Nepal we can rebuild this four classroom school with 1 office for a budget of about 50,000 Canadian dollars, which is quite phenomenal, and it also makes it very realistic for us to raise funds with local donors in the construction community that I'm in, and in the Victoria community and British Columbia community as a whole, where it really doesn't, it's a lot of work, but the goal is very achievable, which makes it exciting for us.
Today we're actually going to be meeting with a lot of the government officials, the district ones. It's a process that we have to go through to get all the approvals, and so we're meeting with them today. We're also meeting with an engineering firm that we've already contracted. We've had communications with them. We've already contracted them to start a design, but we're going to have to modify it to a small degree just for this site, and so we'll be meeting with them today and hopefully signing a contract for them to finalize the design.
Rob tries out different building methods.
Well, the actual construction process is 2 to 3 months, but the process to get to where we can start putting a brick down has been months, almost well over a year.
It's great to see an organization like Another Brick in Nepal. It becomes very clear that the government of Nepal is painfully slow in dispersing promised reconstruction funds. We see slabs of concrete with some rebar pillars. Many villagers have started to take out loans with huge interest. They are very tired of hearing from the Nepalese government that the millions and billions earmarked for reconstruction will soon be released to them. Dr. Bishnu Pandey teaches at BCIT in Vancouver, but grew up and worked in Nepal as a structural engineer. He is the world expert on earthquakes. Since the earthquake, Bishnu has been assisting the people of Nepal.
I learned that Bishnu was in Nepal, so we connected. His answer on my first question about the earthquake was a surprise.
Definitely, we mourn, the loss of lives and then destruction it created, but it could have been much bigger and more impactful. Thankfully, it did not. It's unusual that 7.8 magnitude earthquake has only 15 to 16% of G. That is where we say G. The full 100% of the gravity, that is what we say G. It's only 15%. And then even the code here is saying that design earthquake is 45%. But we have only 15-16%, and that's it. That is very low level of shaking. But then that shaking is low, but then when it comes to the swinging that frighten people, it's a lot.
Earthquake experts do not describe earthquakes in terms of Richter scale. developed in the 1930s, which describes the amplitude of an earthquake. Modern research talks about G-force, which, simply put, measures the intensity of an earthquake as force equals mass times acceleration, where acceleration is 32 feet per second squared of a falling object and describes the incrementally increasing speed of the object. For a rigid building, it is the incrementally increasing intensity of the side-to-side shaking in these G-force terms, not the up and down shaking, which causes the destruction. Nick asked Rob Tornell if he could join them, and together they travelled again outside of Kathmandu, with the usual stops for overcrowded buses. At one point they had to stop for half an hour because they had to empty the sand truck by hand. Or an election parade of motorcycles. And yes, sometimes the road was still under construction. Most of the people live from the land and are small farmers. After a 6-hour ride, the team finally arrived at the demonstration site. Bishnu shows all the different building methods which have been tried.
This is the training site, basically to show them how the new technology works for this village. You can see. Yes. And that is the major reinforcement. And then this is the demonstration how a beam, at the floor level will be anchored to the wall. This is a connection of the floor, basically a floor, with the beam system to the wall with the anchoring system. You can see there. Yes. So how it is anchored there, and then there is no way this stone's pulling out. Right. Because of the wires here. So that's the idea, using a very innovative way, the combination of the wires and the bends. And these are continuous bend, right? Yes. But these ones are small stitches. We call it stitches. They stop here, right? They stop here. Also, these are the vertical reinforcement at the end of the opening. Yeah. So basically, that means there will be a window. At the end, there is a critical place, right?
The goal is to teach the villagers on how to rebuild their houses.
All throughout the home, all the walls. So this is connecting.
Traveling with Bishnu and Rob was a great learning experience. Bishnu is passionate about not only helping the people of Nepal to rebuild, but teach them to do it themselves. And they help each other again.
And every time the home is constructed, other people will come and share the work. And after the completion of that home, in another home, the group will go there. And in this process, they will
no transaction of money, right?
We traveled from village to village, and every time we stopped, I was relieved that we had survived another part of the trip. But it's great to see the progress that has been made with the rebuilding efforts of their homes.
Rob, as a bricklayer, jumps in to help with the construction. Bishnu took the team to a school that is rebuilt with the new methods in Melamchi. Again, the students were lucky that there was no school on that fateful day 2 years ago. Looking at the catastrophic extent of the damage to the school building, We can only imagine what might have happened to a crowded classroom.
So what happened here is basically from this level to up, this part of the wall, it acted, completely different from the rest. So this one pier, one pier is acting differently than the solid block down. And then there is no band, like in other part, there is no connection part. So we can see the clear damage around that lip.
Another great idea from Bishnu was to show at the new school in different colors where the reinforcements are.
Part of this picture here is as a demonstration value. It has a large demonstration value. The painting here with all white paints are basically to show where the reinforcement goes, right? So even if it is all same thing, but this one as a seal band, that here is a cement concrete with reinforcement, here is a cement concrete with reinforcement, that's another one. This one is a continuous all the way, a little bit small thickness, but then the more critical is the lintel one here with a little bit larger thickness, but it's all continuous throughout.
As a teacher, Dr. Bishnu Pandey never gives up a chance to teach and told his students always to be vigilant and aware, even with their new school.
To understand Nepal, it's important to remember that we're talking about a country of 29 million people who speak 123 languages, and in the 10 years prior to 2000 experienced 9 changes of government. But despite this, despite political chaos, economic uncertainty, and a major earthquake, Nepal endures. To travel in Kathmandu is to experience a perfect metaphor for life in Nepal. A cacophony of voices, languages, bells, horns, chimes, chants, and prayers. Almost unbearable to the Western ear, it's some kind of wonderful found music, which, if somehow orchestrated, is the voice of the Nepalese cities. The people are self-reliant. They are Buddhists, Muslims, Kiratists, and Christians living together in relative peace. Religious practice is a very public matter. Nothing is hidden, even the cremation of this man on the banks of the river to which his ashes will be consigned, together with his favorite meal. Outside the major centers, like Kathmandu, life continues as it has for thousands of years, safe and relatively inaccessible in the valleys of the Himalayas between India and Tibet. Life perseveres, as it always has. From time to time, disparate groups of outsiders come to pay homage to Sagarmatha, Everest to the outsiders. To them, the villagers offer hospitality and shelter. Sometimes the outsiders return through the villages again, while some unfortunate others never leave their final resting place, alone in the arms of Sagarmatha. The villages are not and cannot depend on the chaotic government for reconstruction, even though such has been promised. It is with financial and technical help from outsiders from all over the world that they rebuild their houses, schools, and medical centers. These villagers are the beating heart of Nepal. It is their infinite and inexhaustible resilience which inspires the rest of the world. They continue to need your help.
The documentary was produced by Nick Versteeg, who is our guest on Upfront. Nick, both you and I, when we were in Nepal, were absolutely incredibly impressed by the resilience of the people. And you saw it in your documentary, especially the one graphic image of banging through this gigantic piece of rock with a little tiny tool. It's so impressive to see the people and how much they are grateful for the aid and the technology that's come, much of it from Vancouver Island groups. Do you know the extent of the groups that have already given from Vancouver Island?
Yeah, the most visible at this moment is, of course, and he was in Rob Tunor, another brick in Nepal is, the most visible at this moment. He has done a variety of fundraisers. It's really great to see, because I think the schools, and like you saw in the documentary too, the kids were lucky that there was no school, and Bishnu was talking about it also. If this would have happened on a Friday, the death toll would have been way higher because of all the schools that would be. So I think Rob's organization, Another Brick in Nepal, is a great organization that really, that's where people can donate to, because he wants to rebuild more schools.
Mm-hmm.
And like you saw, it doesn't cost $1 million to build a school. They can build a school for a lot less, right?
Very different scale.
Yeah.
The hospital, as you were mentioning as well, interesting that there was no cost to the people.
There's no cost. So the doctor there, he was telling me, I said, how much does it cost to go to the hospital? He says, nothing. The Edmund Hillary Foundation is more or less sponsoring on a yearly basis the hospital, and they do teaching, they do, because you live in such a remote area in the Khumba Valley, and you saw they're still building a couple of rooms on it. Everything is like, and I think people have to understand that everything is incredible basic, but they're helping people. And it doesn't cost anything to go to the hospital, so because it's paid for. Right?
We want to talk about the rebuilding of the houses, the schools, the medical centers. It will continue for many years. It's a very slow progress, so continuous aid is really important from Vancouver Island and otherwise. You connected with a lot of service groups who have already given a considerable amount, Rotary and others. And so we want to once again mention Another Brick in Nepal, one of the websites that would be very useful to visit, as they are continuously having fundraisers, and the Edmund Hillary Foundation, a very reputable organization which is giving to the people of Nepal. I wonder if we could leave people with the thought that another tremendous way to give and have an impact is to actually travel to the country.
That's right.
Both you and I agree. It's an absolutely marvelous country, spectacular in its offerings as far as trekking and hiking. And in case you are worried that you can't handle the trekking, I have to say, I know, Nick, you visited a lot of places, and so did I, especially Pokhara and Nagarkot, which are absolutely beautiful, and the Annapurna Loop, which doesn't require strenuous activity, but it could be enjoyed by just about anybody. And the people, above all, are absolutely giving and lovely. The religions, the culture that is a big part of Nepal that they share very willingly. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
It's, my wife and I did a trek in the Annapurna region, 5 days going, and it was, it's you go high up in the mountains. But I always said, if we can do it, anybody can do it. Trek to base camp is a little bit more challenging, right? But that's how people can help. I think that's, and go and visit the country. It's fascinating.
And I would really emphasize that you will feel grateful for meeting the people. So it's wonderful to be able to give financial aid from here that is sent through various organizations, but to experience the country and the people, that's the best. So thank you so much for spending time with us, Nick. We'll look forward to your future productions as well. Thank you as well for sharing so many documentaries on Shaw TV.
You're welcome.
Nick Versteeg, filmmaker from the Cowichan Valley, has been our guest on Upfront, and we hope you'll join us next month for another focus on leadership. Bye-bye for now.